My name is Steve Jordan. I was one of the creators of the Core Cloud system. Actually came over with the system as we developed and partnered up with Core. Now, as of today, Core is the 100% development agent and owner of this particular product. And I'm here as just maybe as an advisor and a specialist for the product. A couple of things I want to talk to you about is kind of where we're headed with the product. Today, we're going to specifically talk about material management as it pertains to purchasing and inventory and some of the functionality that we have built in there. But I'm also going to kind of open up some of the ideas on where we're going with the product. I'm going to kind of start out first off, just to open up this slide right here. I'm going to be working with the software a lot today, just so that you can kind of see it in functionality. But as I was stating earlier, that this product has been out for about 5 years. We've had it in a lot of different configurations as we developed around. We had some early adopters. I see one of them is on here today. It's been an interesting growth in the product, because what we attempted to do in the very beginning is that we wanted to have a tool that basically was a web-based inventory management purchasing system that would tack on to Sage 300. As it's grown into a much more broad-based product. And we are now starting to kind of tie up the ends and get it into a fashion where it's not a completely customized system. And what you're going to see today is a lot of that functionality that we've had over the course of several different systems. And we're going to be putting all that together as one particular system. If you're not familiar with what Core Cloud is, it's our web entry into the market. We started out in the forms tools. We basically then started adding the credit card reconciliation, expense reporting. We have mobile time entry. We have field purchasing. And then, of course, we have the whole purchasing inventory solution that is what you'll see today. We also have, and we're going to touch on our service management or our work order process system with dispatch, and then some of our equipment management. So at the end of the day today, what you're seeing is this broad-based product that wraps around the Sage 300 ERP. Now, the reason I bring this out, and I did this other cutesy little slide here. Let me move this thing over here and see if I can show it to you a little bit better. What I wanted you to see was basically where we're headed with the product line is that we want to be able to address the future, the cloud-based ERP systems, whether it's Intact in the Sage world or Acumatica or Viewpoint or QuickBooks. Our goal with the product is to be able to have our cloud-based products fully integrated with the ERP systems on the bottom. And then that way you can actually have mobilization on the front end for data entry. It's a single user interface. We have the full integration functionality so that as you move down the line with our products, and if you have our products and decide you want to change, and move up to say Intact, which is the cloud-based accounting that Sage is going to come out with, then you'll just be able to migrate right there without any problem. So what we're trying to accomplish is build a unique opportunity to where we can basically build a web-based workflow, mobilized workflow around these tools, and it not disrupted if the ERP changes on the bottom. So this is kind of the way we're addressing it. TimberScan, of course, has been our flagship product. Just a brief note to that, if you haven't done TimberScan Go, because TimberScan is legacy, we are now moving a lot of the data entry of TimberScan into the cloud using TimberScan Go. Right now, if you're doing approval, you can do that on a smartphone or a smart device. But we're going to be moving AP entry out there. We're going to be moving the final approval, check review, the AIM lookup for documents. So while TimberScan is going to keep in its nature what we call legacy or on-premise as far as it goes, because of Sage, we'll still be able to deploy without having to use remote desktop, and we'll be able to deploy on mobile devices. So just kind of put that in your back pocket. If you're interested, throw in a support call, ask them to get you hooked up. This is a free product except for the installation. So you can get as many licenses as you have the TimberScan licenses. So this is a really good product for the guys that are doing approval right now. And it's our entree into that market. And we're looking at probably a 2-year track to get all of that out. because we have a lot going on, especially with Intac, and we have a Procore integration now that we have. So what we're trying to do is build these products around these tools, like Avid Exchange, Procore, Acumatica, Sage 100. So if you fit in any of those ballparks, we have integrations now that we can talk to you about so that we can reduce data entry and eliminate all the double entry functionality that goes along with the process. So enough said on that, and I'll take questions towards the end here. So if you have any, just jot them down. Let's jump right here into our material management solution. The system itself is cloud-based, so it launches in a browser, okay? It's basically, we use all and deploy all the unique feature functionality of developing in the web, so you get the benefit of that, so it scales to the type of device that you're on and so on and so forth. So you can run this sitting at Starbucks. Some of the screens don't work real well with a phone, so you may have to have an iPad, but for the most part, you can launch it from a web, and it is a browser-based system. Not to exclude the fact that it's not fully integrated with Sage and with TimberScan. So everything that we do here, we do not do double entry. We actually have a process in the system, and we design the system to basically be a single stroke or a single entry type system with the same entry point validation that we are used to. So let's kind of get started with the product. I'm going to show you this graphic here, then I'm going to jump into the system. Basically, the system is designed as a purchasing inventory system, okay? Now, because it's purchasing and inventory, you may not want inventory. You still may want, though, the database to track your items. Like we have clients that don't really track, inventory, but they want the database so they can do common pricing, or maybe they do estimating and they want to have a common database of items so that when they go and select the items, they can do that. So an item in here can either be inventory or non-inventory. So just because, and I may kind of mix some of this up, so don't be confused with that. If you're looking for a purchasing solution, but you really don't do inventory, you can still use the inventory database because it comes with it. And at the end of the day, you can use that for price books, purchasing vendor item numbers, and a whole slew of other activities that you can do with purchasing. So just kind of keep that in mind. We deploy two different methods of purchasing, which I'll get into a little bit later. We do a material-based purchasing, and then we do what we call traditional purchasing, which you guys are probably more familiar with. But what's really unique about that is you can start a purchase order in our solution, you can route it for approval, and then once it's approved, you can send out to the vendor without any additional information. You can send the vendor the PO, and that's a customizable format. Okay, you can also send that image itself into TimberScan so that it's there sitting in the supporting documents to do the matching to the invoice. And then of course you can go in and it automatically creates, or you can choose to create a commitment in Sage, all by virtue of submitting the PO. So once a PO is entered into the system, then virtually at that point you hit one button and it does all these things all together. So what we're doing is we're eliminating double entry workflow. And we're trying to automate process. Just like we've been very successful in the accounts payable world, this is how we kind of are moving that same philosophy into these other applications. And then what we're calling this is called advanced industry solutions. This is kind of our foundational tool so that we can build these advanced industry solutions so that they have that whole single entry touch, or that entry point validation. Now, what's really kind of unique about this is that as you go through this particular product, you can start the transaction here that's in the website, but also we have mobilized a lot of the functionality. So like for instance, if you wanted to do a material request in the field on a mobile phone, they could basically do the request, route it around for approval, get it approved, and then when it comes into the worksheet of the purchase order, there's no double entry. So we can actually extend that functionality out to the field in a mobile device, even untethered. So that means that they may not have internet connection, but we can still give them the validation they need because of a unique way that Core Cloud does its integration component. But the idea behind it is that you can then take these transactional entry points and manage those based on how you want to do it. So we're not dictating it. We're just saying, hey, we have an option for this. If you're wanting to do that, you can do so. Now, you'll notice also on the receiving component, we do the same thing. You can either do your receiving in here, and we find this, the receiving transaction, because we do a lot with it, that we generally tell the folks just to come into the system and do the receiving. But if you have a remote situation or you're doing a lot of off job site work, maybe you need to put that on a form, but see, that transaction can also be mobilized, and then it can be consumed inside the system without any double entry. And we do it in a batch. I'm an old accountant. When I designed the system, I like batch processing. So when the field submits something into the system and there's never a, we can seamlessly bring it in. I don't like that idea, but if you want it to, it can come in. But I always like to stop it in the office and take a look at it before I update the system with it. But that's a choice that you can make when you put in the system. We also have the ability for purchasing and receiving, but you also have an allocation function. The allocation function is really pretty unique in the fact that now we start talking about inventory type work process, or we can talk about having bill of material management per job. And I'm going to get more involved in that as we go down the road here. But basically, the allocation function, it's a transfer function. There's a consume function. This reserve feature is a little bit different, but these transactions here again can start out in the field as well. So what this does is it gives you a complete and full workflow process, starting at acquiring material and then moving it all the way downstream, and then having your data entry points or having your workflow defined, based on how it works best for you. And that's kind of the core design of the system. But in just simplistic terms, to take away from this little section of conversation, is just you enter or collect the information on that purchase order, whether you do a worksheet and work from there, or you do it straight as a traditional PO, and then it automatically does the transactions here so that you don't have to go in and do any double entry, and all of it's validated so it goes right into the systems. Now, what's really cool, just as a point of interest, is that on the receiving side, one of our challenges a couple of years ago was to eliminate data entry. So because at TimberScan, and we know how the process works in the Sage world with their purchasing and inventory system, they call it vouchering the receiving. We actually call it invoice vouchering, which is basically this, is that when you go in and do your receiving, if you receive through and you're doing inventory, or even if you're not, when you do the receiving transaction here, we also send that transaction along with a copy of the packing slip into TimberScan, okay? So that when the invoice comes in the door, and you get it into TimberScan, you match up the PO and the receiver, all the distribution data entry is done for you. So if you bought, and say you bought 30 items on a PO, when those things came in, your AP clerk doesn't have to sit down there and process 30, reconcile 30 items, because the receiving ticket, if you had any back orders, any of that, is going to drive what should be on that invoice. So when they match up the documents to that receiving ticket, it should balance to that invoice or raise a flag, which allows the AP clerks to then take it from there and figure out what to do with it. So the idea behind that is that this elimination of data entry is a huge move for us. And we're trying to, reduce that to the point to where even if you take, say, in the TimberScan side, we have our capture tool, and and I think this year we're going to have our web capture out, where basically you can take those invoices in, okay, automatically read the invoice, drop it into TimberScan, and all the header data is already filled out. And then when you match up the data between the purchase order and the receiving, all the distribution data is done. So we can virtually eliminate all the AP entry on an invoice and have it validated by the workflow that actually is happening within the processing of that transaction. Really cool stuff. And we're seeing that to be something that, we're perfecting it every day. The cloud version of our capture tool, which is going to be out this year, is really slick. So keep your eyes open. The newsletter is the best way to keep track of all this stuff. If you're not getting it, put in a support ticket through the portal and say, hey, I need to get on the newsletter, and make sure that you're reading through that, because our marketing director, Emily, does a great job distributing that information and telling you more about those products. But this is basically what I'm going to be showing you today in real time. Another thing that I want to do, just as a quick review, just so that you can kind of see where we're going with all this, is that I want to take a few minutes and just kind of talk through this. We have the functionality. I got a question there. Okay, I'll catch that question here in just a minute. One of the things that you're going to see today is the inventory component of the system. What I want you to be aware of is that it has, we have finished up and have worked through the development of our work order system, and I'm going to touch a little bit on that. We have a full service work order, dispatch, equipment module. We've basically, we started with the material management, and now we've kind of grown this thing into a really attractive system. And I don't want to leave this without spending a lot of time, not a little bit of time telling you about that. But generally speaking, this is a user interface when you log into the system. And let me back out of here just for a second. And just, you know, when you log into the CCS product, if you already have it, this is the single user interface. So it's the same interface that everybody's used to seeing if they have it. So it's just another option on the particular menu. So in this particular case, if I'm working through the inventory side, I'm going to drill into the inventory system like this. And the first screen that I get to is the inventory listing screen. Now, this can be non-inventory or it could be inventory items. But the idea behind the solution that we built was twofold. One of them is we wanted this screen to be like an Excel spreadsheet, so that you could manipulate things around and look at information and so on and so forth. The second thing is that we want it to be simple enough to where in our security process, when you set up security, you can turn on and off these screens. So a person may only have access to the inventory items and they can only see those items. So you can actually organize yourself to where the folks that need to come in, they can go check their inventory, or they can go in there and check the items and see what the pricing is, or who do we buy that from. So if you notice right here, here's some inventory items here. This happens to be, I think, roofing style material. But at the end of the day, if you look at what you're looking at here, for instance, if I wanted to say, look at my inventory based on location, if you're used to the inquiry tool that we have that's in Sage, in TimberScan, that's a grouping tool. And this grouping tool allows you to kind of look at your items and see how those items come across different your locations. Now I'm going to pause for a second here and talk about our location process. One of the things that I felt really important was when we designed the system is if you look at the construction world, we're very much oriented to job related bill of materials. So when you're going out and buying material for a particular job, I wanted to be able to go in and say, let's create a location instead of, we call it location because it may not be a job. It could be on a job, you might have 5 Connex boxes that you want to track where the material is. So you have a lot of flexibility with these locations. But for the most part for today, let's just say the location is a job location and this happens to be the job. Well, I can now take from my master inventory list or my master item list and transfer and estimate the items into that location. So if I happen to have, say, 655 items, but on that job I'm only needing 10 or 15, then basically all I do is I move those items and reserve and set up the estimates for those jobs into that location. So now I can see, even though that item might be used on 5 or 6 other locations, I can come in and use and have a standard or a normalized inventory numbering schema for the material that we use on a job. Now, that could also be that I build it every time I do a location, like a buyout. So when you start looking at the solution and how that works, the location is very important. We did add the area functionality for you inventory guys. So you may have an item that's in a location, but it might be in a different area. This could be the job, this could be the Connex box, this could be the warehouse, this could be the bin level, you know, the bin location. So you can manage the locations down to a very micro type design. So we've given you a lot of flexibility in that particular process. Now, one of the things that you'll notice, again, this is inventory, and I'm going to work with this this particular area, this particular 1000 Abbey job. Now, I'm going to highlight the item right here, and as I copy this, and this is what's cool about web interfaces, and I paste it, when I hit enter, I now can come in here and take a look at where that item is across all my locations. And if you'll notice at my main warehouse, I've got a -400. And that's because you can set the system to go into negative if you're just wanting to manage, say, from a workflow, work order standpoint or something like that. But I was doing some testing and putting some stuff in, and you'll notice that I transferred from this main warehouse 400 items into this location, which is that Abbey location. And also, I'm sorry, and I took 10 and I put it over here. Well, I can always come up here at any given time, and as I hit this twisty, it gives me a full detailed list of all the transactions that basically happened on that item for that location. Real powerful. You can see who you bought it from. You can see what work order it's assigned to. You can have, if there was a change order put on it, was there any change orders that were in there? So all of this information we store at this inventory level, so that basically what's happening is that when I go look up an item, if I am doing inventory and I needed, say, 5 or 6 of these items, I could do a quick review of where these things are and are they allocated to any location. Now, these could be a physical allocation, or it could be what we call a virtual allocation. A virtual allocation means it's still in the bin. It's just that we have this allocated for that particular job. So when I go look at my main warehouse, which is my main inventory, it tells me that, hey, I don't have any of those items, even though I got 400 out there. Not all of them are allocated to specific jobs, or they're allocated to specific locations. So we're giving you a tool here, and you'll see this will make a little more sense as we go down the line, because you'll see why we do it like that. But for the most part, that's what you're looking at. And on the inventory side, when you see this, you can see that we have plenty of space for item description, item name, item number, location, area. You can filter by type. So if you come up here, you might want to just be working with a particular type of inventory today. So you could come in here and say, well, I just want to see the arresters. So you can come in here and filter it and say, I want to equal to the arresters, or whatever the case may be, and it'll filter and sort this out. And it's like an Excel spreadsheet. It works the same way. So the idea behind this is such that you have all this information that we're capturing, min, max levels, if you're doing inventory, the standard vendor, quantity on hand, quantity on order, what's been reserved. This is actually going to become estimated. What's been allocated already out, and I'll talk a little more about that. The cost coding, the costing, we support all the different types of costing, FIFO, LIFO, average. But what we do here, and this is kind of unique in the fact that we can have a landed cost. So you could put a burden on top of everything that comes in and pick up a landed cost, so that if you're using that on the consumption, that's the cost that gets booked to job cost. I'll take a side note on here in the fact that when I build software, it's always a sub ledger of the general ledger and job cost system. So you can do what I call source auditing. Source auditing means I can track a transaction back to its original its original creation, so that when you push these transactions over, basically you can do the debit credit functionality in the job cost side that passes through the general ledger. So in this case right here on consumption, basically you can pull the landed cost versus what the actual vendor cost is on that particular item. The standard cost is really kind of cool. This was one of our clients. I think they're on here today. They were the ones that wanted to do this. They do use a work order system. Well, they do a % markup T&M, and they want to make sure that on their particular invoices that they send out of the work order billing system that we have, that they don't book just the cost or the landed cost. They may have gone out and bought some scrap, and they got a 10 cents on a dollar, or they bought out a company, or whatever the case may be, and now they're selling it. They want to be able to set a standard cost that they can use for their billing. And that's what standard cost is used for in that scenario. We're also using standard cost just to kind of pick up for the guys that don't use it for material management. They just want to have an item database. We use standard cost so that they can see how much the cost is. That kind of prelude into something else that I'll tell you about, in the fact that what we're doing today is we have the integration being built for bill of materials management. That's where the estimator, when you come off your estimating machine and you want to create a bill of materials, you'll be able to basically import that bill of material with its estimate into that location. So that functionality that we're building, we may pull in the standard cost. We may use that standard cost feature for this. Is that you would go both ways with that, because in your estimating system, like if you're using Timberline estimating, you'd build your basic inventory listing or your material listing here, put your standard vendor and your standard cost on there, and that way when you import up the estimating system, or if you're just using an Excel spreadsheet, you start working from a predefined cost. So it gives you a price book, or it gives you a basis book to start your estimate with. And then when you feed it back in, you can feed that estimate back into the system and then go through the whole purchasing functionality, the request for bid functionality from the BOM that comes from, or the bill of materials that comes from the estimation process that you have. So we're incorporating a lot of that here. The reason I'm telling you a lot of these things, because if you're just looking for pure inventory, it's easy. We do it. We can turn off some of this stuff, and you're not, you can take this off the column. You don't want to use description. You can come over here and take item description out of the column. So you can take some of this stuff on and off however you want to do it. But at the end of the day, there's reasoning behind some of the functionality that we have here. So this is our inventory screen. I can come back when we get to the questions section. I can pop back into here. Let me walk through just the basic functionality of purchasing. If you remember, I told you there's two methods of purchasing. The first method, of course, is traditional, and that's where you just do a purchase order. And you select, you create the PO, you select the vendor, you put in your items, and you kind of move from that standpoint. This section right here, which is called our inventory purchasing section, one of the cool parts of that is that this is where you can come in here and create a purchasing worksheet. Now, if you notice right away, if I go out here and I select this 1000 Abby account and I hit create, it's only going to show me the items that I have pulled in from estimating that I need to buy. Okay. Now, what's unique about this is that I can always go add an item to this list if it's not here. But if I did my estimate right, and these are all the materials that I need, this is what it's telling me that I have. And if you notice, I don't have anything on hand, so I got to order everything. But for this chop shop stuff, I can go ahead and transfer this out to the job if I want to go ahead and allocate or reserve those items so that nobody else takes them. Okay. So it gives you that functionality right here so that you can see, where that is. Now, if I wanted to come over here and let's say I want to go ahead and put on order a couple of things. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to buy 10 of these. I'm going to buy 10 of these, and I'm going to buy 10 of these. Now, if you notice that these two come from Corkin, this one here comes from Star Building. Well, I may have come up here and I've actually can export this to Excel and sent this to 3 or 4 vendors for a bid. And when it came back in, I opened my worksheet back up and said, I'm going to buy this one from Corkin. I'm going to buy this from Star Building and whatever. And I can select the vendors and put in their price right here. These are the defaults, but if I wanted to change the vendor, all I got to do is check on that. It's fully integrated, so I can select whatever vendor, McCabe Lumber, and now I'm buying it from McCabe Lumber. Okay, so this worksheet gives you the ability to have now, think through this, I can now go to the field, put on a mobile phone a purchase request for material that has, hey, I need to have. So when they go in and look at it, they only see these items because that's what's been, estimated on the job. They can select how much they want at this point in time, and then it will automatically come in and update the grid. So there's no double entry, but it comes in as a batch. It creates the new worksheet and it comes in as a batch. And then I may have to take that and go send it out for bid. And if not, maybe I already know the vendor. These are the standard vendors. I can go ahead and process that, but I don't have to go and create 2 different POs or 3 different POs. I can just come over here and work it from this worksheet. If this is coming in from our work order system, which I'll show you in a minute, or our invoicing system, then it's going to come in here. And then basically on this side, it's going to tell you, okay, well, what sales order is it associated with? So all the purchase requests that come off the work orders are going to come into a worksheet. So your purchasing guy can sit here and basically use this as an interim device or interim tool so that they can come in and manage these requests from the fields. Now, you may also have the field just say, hey, I need to buy from Johnny's Body Shop a piece of this. Well, that's just a straight PO that goes into purchasing. But this worksheet is just one method of purchasing that we actually do. So here I'm going to come save the changes, and then I'm going to go ahead and process all of these at one time. So I can keep a worksheet open. I may get 4 or 5 items in that I can go ahead and get processed, but I'm still waiting on bids for the other ones. But then once I'm done with that, I just come in here and create the PO. And then basically right there, that PO has been created. Now it moves over here to the purchase order. Okay. And this is where it's kind of cool. I eliminated, here's those 2 POs, one for Corkin and one for McCabe. if I click on this one right here, I can go look, there's that black mortar die that I'm buying from them. So this is where I'm going to come in and pick that up. Now, at this point in time, it also did this one for Corcoran. Those are those 2 flute covers. You see, that's pretty cool. Now, what's going to happen here is that now I'm ready to work this thing up. I would go in and edit the header data. So I can come in and it's going to automatically pull in a lot of the information that I have. These are all the vendor details I can put in. I give you plenty of information to put in here. Who it's going to get emailed to. These are shipping details. So you can kind of see shipping notes, delivery date, give me the email when it comes out. What's my FOB points? You know, all of this information can be looked up and pushed out. Same thing with comments. You may have tax information on here, and I handle the New York State exempt and tax group functionality. Down here, this is reporting. You could have a different format of PO if this were, say, over $10,000, or maybe this is a service style PO and you want some terms and conditions different than if it were material. But the idea behind this is that we give you plenty of information to be able to come down here and fill out that header so that when you preview that PO, which is going to be your formatted PO, okay, and it's going to have your terms and conditions on it, that basically what's going to happen is that it's going to have, you have all the fields there to be able to fill in the blanks on your PO. So so if you can appreciate that, that's where that's going. Now, when we get down here to the bottom, now I don't have some of the defaults turned on, but like if I come down here, this would have automatically selected the job and the header and so on and so forth. At this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and pick up this. I'm going to pick up the, there's no extra cost code. Whoops, I don't have a cost code on that job. Let me get back. Let's see. So when I pick up, oh, let me go to the bottom. Those will be right. This one. So when I come over here, I pick up the extra. No, don't have a cost code on that one. Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna give this one more shot and I'm gonna quit. Jerry. Yeah, there we go. And then I have a cost code on this. This is going to be repairs material. And then down here on the category, I don't think I need a category, so I can go back to the PO here. But basically, it's going to force me to do this, save my changes, and then this allows me to categorize it. If it's an inventory expense, it's going to go to the GL code. Some of this can be automated, so you don't have to enter the line item functionality. If you notice down here on the expense, this item description, we give you plenty of room. So if this were a service style transaction, you've got about, I don't know, 600-700 characters that you can type the stuff into. But basically right here, as you go through, you can have all of that in here. It allows you to manage tax groups by line item, tax by line item, vendor units of measure, so it handles the core, you know, the where if you buy it in bulks of 10 and you sell it in bulks of 1, you can do the conversions and so on and so forth. But once you get that, you can add new items to it on the fly. But again, this is that traditional PO functionality that you have that's generally associated with doing a standard PO. So you don't bypass that. What we did is we put a worksheet on the front of that, which is a material worksheet. Now, you can also come over here and upload various informations. Like we have some folks that want to be able to pull in a picture of the item, or maybe they want to do the submittal that goes along with it. They can put this in here and then that will be attached to what gets sent out, you know, on the form. So you can do a lot of different things here to make this work together. But the idea behind this is that once the PO is actually in play and you put in all of this information, then at this point in time, you would just come in here. You don't see that here, but we can actually route this for approval. So this PO could be routed before it actually gets submitted. But in this particular case, I won't go down that line. You just hit submit and then that purchase order is done. What did it do? It sent the PO to the vendor. It sent the transaction. It accumulates the transaction in a posting file to go to the commitment module in Sage. And it also goes in and sends the image transaction over to TimberScan. Okay. So now let's take this and go the next step further. If you come into the receiving function, here's that McCabe lumber. Now, again, this could be imported in from the field. So you may have a mobile device that does the receiving, but when you see how this actually works, it's pretty slick. So at this point in time, when you come in here, you're going to do an edit, and on this particular PO, you have to actually create the PO functionality here. So when you come over on this side and you do this, you're going to come over and let me get back here. Sorry. Let's see, this isn't completed. Did I buy that? Let's see, edit. Back, submit, transfer. Oh, create. So I come over here and I hit my create. Now, notice on all these grids, you have the same grouping functionality. So if they had a lot of detail on here, you could do that. But I'm going to come over here and create a receiving event. Okay, the receiving event is today's receiving, so that when you click on that, it's going to come down and assume that you build complete. Okay, so what that means is that you ordered 10, you got 10. Now, if you didn't, you could put in here, you could put in 5 and it would manage the back order. The idea behind this is that basically, if it came in from the field, you'd have the image attached. If not, here you would just attach the receiving ticket by clicking on here and going and searching for the scanned image of that particular item, and then just pull it right into the system. So at the end of the day, that's the receiving transaction functionality. Now, one of the cool things here is we have this over receiving feature. This is a customization that we can do where basically it'll auto gen a change order if you're willing to allow it to go into over receiving. So that's why that happens to be there. But for the most part here, it's going to do your receiving and your back order out of the box. So it manages all that here. Now, once you've gotten all this in, you can then, save your changes. And then once you're finished, you then submit and then transfer. So the submit and transfer in the submit are a little bit different. The submit functionality here basically then sends the information into the system and goes through those processes. Submit and transfer will if you're using inventory, will automatically transfer the items to the job. So if you're buying out of the main warehouse and you're transferring, it has some functionality there to where we eliminate the double touch of that, where you can do it all in one particular aspect. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and submit, and that submit is basically done. Now, you can go through here, and once it's in inventory, if I come back up here and I go look at that particular item here where I ordered 10, if I come back here to inventory and I look at this black mortar item right here, and I come back and go back up to inventory, let's go take a look at that and see what that looks like. And if I paste it into here, I hit enter, then you'll notice right here where basically this is that 1,000 Abbey job. I've got 10 of them in stock. Here, the quantity on hand. If I come in and look at the transaction, you can see that I received and I purchased it. So all of this information is being at your fingertips, so you know exactly where you stand on your material. So if I'm in the field and I'm looking for this stuff, I can see, hey, yeah, it was purchased and hadn't been received yet, and so on and so forth. So you can see right away, all that's right there in that particular step of the process. Now, I'm going to take pause here because I want to tell you a little bit about what happens at receiving as well. If you're in the TimberScan side of things, and I'm going to go back to here and do that in this area, and I'm just going to I'm going to do this through a video process because so that you can kind of see on the receiving side. When you go in through the receiving side here, and you're doing the document matching and you're doing the processing, one of the things that you're going to see here, and I'm going to just jump through here once I do my receiving. And this is where the integration is really pretty slick. What's going to happen is that this particular integration, this is now TimberScan. So when the invoice comes into TimberScan, all of the documentation has been sent over to TimberScan. Okay, so that the supporting documents that are down on the bottom, you click on it, there's the supporting documents, and boom, those things are right there so you can match them up. When you match them up, then this thing's going to automatically, if you have invoice vouchering, it will automatically match up the line item transactions off that commitment based on the receiving transaction. So it eliminates that whole distribution transaction functionality. So if you can appreciate what I just did, is that if we did receiving in the field, we tested it before it got into the system, somebody in the back office agreed, said, yep, we got that received. When the invoice hits the door, AP now, all they have to do is match up the documents, so you got a good three-way match, and then from there, it automatically does the distribution on the bottom end of the process. So it's really pretty slick because it starts eliminating a lot of the data entry that you guys are used to doing in the process of handling your accounts payable. And if you're already using PO inventory and you're vouching that receiver, if you know in TimberScan, it's a 2 or 3 step function to get those invoices all together. Here, it's fully integrated so that it's a seamless transaction. So now your inventory and your purchasing and all of that functionality now just flows right into TimberScan, right into Sage, and all the efficiencies that you gain out of that are huge. Okay, so let me take it to the next level. So I want to kind of talk about allocation, because in the process of doing allocation, this is where you can go through the process of handling moving the items from one place to another. So like for instance, if you're transferring, so if you have inventory and let's say you're buying out the job and half the items on there you stock, you can go ahead and do a transfer and then print a picking ticket, give it to your warehouse guy, and he can go pick the items and shrink wrap them or move them to a staging area or just basically, pull them for whoever's coming to get them. And then the transfer, and then once they're done, they can be consumed. And once that's consumed, then that's when it books it to job cost. So we have a 2-step function or just a 1-step function. Some of our clients, what they do is whenever they get ready to do that, instead of transferring and consuming, they just do a consume transaction. And whenever they do the consume transaction, they just come over here, and I'll just pull one up so you can kind of see how that looks. But when you do the consume transaction, this is where, if you notice the distribution functionality of that is such that this is where you do the coding of to the job. So at this point, you would come in and job code it, and this is going to credit inventory or credit WIP and put it into your job cost. And then you automatically, through our export feature, you automatically hit the transactions and export that as a job cost entry. So we manage that transaction from inventory to job cost. The other thing that we built transactions for or transfer for was for handling what we call light manufacturing. So like if you're a sheet metal shop or maybe you're a cabinet shop and you're picking items for that particular cabinet build and you're putting them in front of the saw. Well, you might pick the items, put them in front of the saw, and then that's a transfer. And then when they're done sawing and it's fixing to go to production to get nailed together, then basically at that point in time you may do the consumption transaction. So and then you may do a negative transfer that says, okay, well, we didn't use this, so we transfer that back to inventory. So it utilizes the functionality, and this is where the barcoding and some of the other stuff that we have that are customized into the system, that you can use it so that you can manage material using the transfer and the allocation function. So, and this allows you the ability to basically meld that into your workflow so that you can keep real high, real close tabs on your inventory. Another thing I want to show you before I jump too far into this is this whole aspect that we have assemblies and kits. Assemblies are items that you build on the fly. That means that I have an assembly that is made up of a box, a fuse, and a switch, okay? Now, that box and fuse and switch are individualized, or they have their own identity in my inventory. So when I sell that assembly, I just want to deduct from each one of those whatever it requires. And then the cost is also going to come over, and it's an assembly, but it keeps its own identity. If I come over here, and that's what this assembly is. So if I come over here, I can create a new assembly. I give it an assembly name. I can, give it a, 111. This is test. And then when I hit add, basically what happens here is that this allows me to go in and pick the items that are basically part of that assembly. So if I come down here, I can add a new record. I can select the item and say, okay, this is one of the items I need in the unit of measures each, and I need 10, okay? So you can see right away, I can just continue to build on that particular assembly. But when I consume it, or if I sell it out through the work order, then it's gonna automatically pull one of each one of these items, okay? Different than what we call a kit. Now you're going to see this, it's called pieces over here. But in this particular scenario, we have what we call recipes. I'm sorry, not pieces. This is they make concrete. And each particular recipe is made up of certain blends of sand and sugar, whatever, but not sugar, but different blends of different things. So as you go through the recipe worksheet, then basically what happens is that you come over here and you can come in and basically build a recipe for that particular item. So if you notice on here, this particular item consists of these particular items. Okay, different than an assembly, a recipe, once it's built, will automatically pull from each one, take its cost, roll it up into a finished goods. So if you were building something that you were selling out as a finished item, but you want it to be, like in their case, they have what they call, concrete number one, okay? And it's made up of this recipe, which has about 8 or 9 different items. And what it does is it takes the quantities of each one of those items and rolls it up. But also, if I sold, say, 2 tons of that, it multiplies all that by 2 tons. So the cost factor now rolls up to a finished good, and that finished good now has the summation of all the cost multiplied by the quantity that you're selling in the invoice or you're consuming in the system. So you can kind of see right away, we have lots of functionality that we put into the system, and it's organically being built because we're listening to our customers, which is what we've done for years now. It just, in this particular situation, we've grown the company tremendously over the last year to address the needs of what these tools are going to be required, and we're listening to our customers, and we're just we're trying to put all this together so that we can deliver and grow the product like we have our TimberScan product for the last 12 years. So if you can appreciate that, in this particular scenario, the inventory functionality, the purchasing functionality, and all of that now is basically integrated into what we call POIV. Now, I want to take a pause here just for a second, then I'm gonna open it up for questions. If you take a look here, I just want to go into our work order process. One of the cool parts of our work order system is that it's highly customizable, and it's not it's that way because a lot of the stuff that's out there, it's multi-tenant and you can't change it. This particular system, we try to keep it as close to out of the box as possible, but we can do a lot of different things here. Matter of fact, across the top, this is the actual work order. Like in this particular case, this company does a request from they have a request that comes in from the field. From the customers or from a new customer. So we have a whole request functionality that's built into that. As you go through, and if you notice, if they're existing customer, they can go through there and fill it out. But this is designed to work with the telephone. Then once that request is done, then it's given to an estimator who goes out and does an estimate. And once that estimate's sent to the customer, they agree to it, it goes to work order. Then they install the roof, they install the gutters, whatever they're doing. And once it finishes that process, it goes to completed, where it's reviewed by the owners. And then at that point, it goes to billing. Now, billing gets sent to AP. When they go into the actual estimate function, I'm going to just drop into here and just show you what one looks like real quick. This header data is not configurable, it's customized, but we can customize this based on the questions you need it to say. But when you get down into here on the estimate side, you have these estimate items that you can build. You've got the whole scheduling function, which is integrated with our dispatch system. You have notes that can come in from an e-form, like when the estimators go out and snap pictures of the repair issues and so on and so forth. All of that comes in automatically into here and gets stored. Because we integrate with job costs, they can set the job up here, and then these are just the informational items that we pass over through the export to get it into the job master record and set up the cost codes and all the things that go with it. We can pick up labor on the work ticket, and all of that gets pushed over into our CCS employee timekeeping module. So it goes into the employee grid. So if any of you guys are using the payroll system and you're using the payroll approval grid, the hours that come from here go into that approval grid. Same thing with material. If you notice on the material line, when you pick out that particular location, so if I come in here and let's say I do the main location, and I'm going to come down and say, and you can see it's the items or the assemblies, I'm just going to put in, and it's all sort of Google search. So as it's looking for the items or the locations, let's say I put these items on my work order. See how it's all tied together? Now see back over here, where I say, is it on hand or is it requested? Well, if you notice, I don't have any quantity on these. So I need to go ahead and do a requisition. Well, that automatically goes to a worksheet. If I put labor, it automatically goes to labor. If I have equipment in here, it goes to the equipment module. So you can see right away, I got billings. If they go out and do inspections, I can put that in here. This is where I can, I can modify some of this. In this case, we call this an advanced industry solution because this customer has a modified system. They wanted to do a specific thing, but they didn't have to spend the $200,000-$300,000 or $400,000 to get one developed, because we can take with what we start, which is 50, 60, 70% of what we have out of the box, and then we just modify what it does. And that's where we think it's going to be a huge advantage, because now I can give you something exactly what you want, and with some customizations, and not have to spend the whole process or spend the money on a ground floor customization. So that shows you a little bit about that and how that works, and the inventory system and how that works. I'm going to open it up for questions right now. So I've got on my chat, let's see what I got here. AP invoice is generated from the receipt, so the capture tool is useless. Not really. The capture tool is going to allow you to pick up the header data. So when the capture tool comes in, it'll pick up the header data and then drop that into the system, and then basically pull the distribution lines in when you match up the documents. And that's how that actually works. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you guys here and just pick up some questions here. If you guys have any questions, just jump online and ask me the questions.
Steve, there was one chat question. Can you talk a little bit about barcoding and how those systems work with CCS?
Yeah, barcoding in construction is really kind of crazy. If you're doing inventory, the problem, it's not like going to the grocery store and using your barcode system, right? Because those are UPC, that everybody uses the same barcodes. We have a physical count tool. That's generally where barcode comes into play, is where you can go in and suspend the count. So like you can come in here and count specific items. You can count a specific location. And then once you create that physical count, then basically down here what happens, so let's say that I want to come in here and I want to create a physical count, and let's see, item type, let's see, it's a little different. Let's see, I'm in the wrong system. We don't do it. Let me go back to this. So if I'm doing on physical counts, that's where you would have, and you would start what we call a count worksheet. And in the count worksheets, it's gonna go through the situation here, like on that Abby. And if I create the physical count, see it does a timestamp and suspends the inventory here. Now, if I click on it, then these are all the items in that location. So if I had a whole bunch of items, I could actually have barcodes on those, and I could take a wand or take my phone and go out and go to the bin and hit it and put in the quantity, go to the bin and hit it, put in the quantity, and then import the count into here, and then run the verification, and then it would post the adjustments. Now, to do that, you would have to make sure that you put the barcode on the items or on the bins, which means that we have to either barcode the receiving, which is a way to do it, or it's a predetermined. If you're using bins, you'd put barcodes there, or you may have a book that you have barcodes in. But the idea behind it is that the barcoding function is simple, because even today on a phone, you can do barcode reading. We recommend the scanners because they tend to be a little bit more durable and better, but easier to use. But the idea behind it, and every time barcoding to us is custom, because everybody wants to do it differently. And until we see some trend in there, we just build it as a custom option. We have the hooks in there to do it. It's just that, where do you want to barcode? We think transfer is a great place to barcode, or maybe even consumption if we already have the barcodes on there. So this is another area where barcoding kind of comes into play, because you predetermine the barcode, and in some way or other, you put the barcode on the bin or on the box or on the item, so that when you get ready to get dispense of it, you can hit that item and it's the same code number. So that's kind of how we use barcoding. This thing, will you be able to set a different order type and stock type? Yeah, oh, okay, I got you. Linear board feet to the conversion. In the inventory item, when you set up that particular item, there is a unit of measure. So since you're using linear feet to board feet, basically this is where you set that up. And when you create the record, this is where you create the unit of measure. And then when you apply the unit of measure, you apply the ratio. So like, for instance, let's say you're selling sheet metal. It's easy for me to do that. But you buy it by the square foot, but you sell it by the sheets. Well, you know that 480 square feet, is it 480 square feet? No, it's 40, 4 by 8 is a 32 square feet, right? Is that right? I think it is. Anyway, whatever it is, it'll do the conversion for you. So you can do your purchasing and you can use the unit of measure for that. That's one of the areas that we're actually looking at right now and trying to make that a better process. We just added it this last year and we see some things we can do with it, but we have all of the stuff built into it. If you had a particular methodology that you were using, we could always customize it. But for the most part, if you're doing, I think the board feet conversion would be a simple conversion for us to be able to do the purchasing. And then when it lands, you would convert it back to whatever its base, if you're consuming in linear feet or you're buying, I know in the wood business, you typically you get the hacks where they come in off the shell. You don't really know what you're getting. 2x4s, different mixtures of board, and that's more in the stick stuff. But if you're doing like 2x4, 4x8 plywood sheets and things like that, I believe we can handle most of the, if not all of those calculations to answer that question, because we have it set up. It's just that we don't have a lot of folks that do that. So, any other question? Will it work with the Sage 100 contractor? Great question. We want it to. Eventually it will. We don't have it set up yet to do that. Eventually we're hoping to get that out there. I don't know specifically when that will happen. I would like it to be this year. But what we're trying to do right now is we're growing the product line right now in what it is. Sage 100 has inventory and sales order and work order built into it. We feel like our product would fit very well in that, and it is something that we're going to be on our list to do. It's just today it's not. I couldn't sell it to you today because we don't have that ready yet. Right. Let's see what is a receipt does match invoice exactly. So vendor invoice for more than one PO at a time, or vendor sends separate invoice for one receipt. Those are real specific questions that I can get into. We're running out of a little bit of time. I wouldn't mind if you don't mind, Brandy, if we can get back together and I can answer those questions for you. There's process for each one of those that you're asking, and so like for instance, there is going to be like processing where you have multiple POs at a time. I can tell you right now, you would have to do it a different way, because you couldn't use invoice vouchering because you can't receive two POs and combine them into one transaction. So, but you don't have to use invoice vouchering. And so we'd have to look at that a little bit and see exactly what we're talking about. When you separate the vendor invoice for one receipt, I'm pretty sure we can handle that. I'm thinking out of the box here. I think I can handle that. I just have to think through that a little bit. If the receipt doesn't match the invoice exactly, that's a process answer. What are you going to do with that? Do you send it back to the vendor? Are you doing confirming POs? If you want to make the adjustment, maybe that's a routing issue that has to be dealt with. It could be taxes that cause the problem, and there's a different methodology there for that. But we can definitely handle and work with most of those questions. So I think if we pick those up individually, we should be able to satisfy those questions and those answers. Anything else? We're right at the finish line here. I hope you like what you see. What we're really attacking here is we feel like our product is going to be And I'll talk just for a quick second about what we call our industry solutions. We have worked closely, like for industrial maintenance. We've worked closely in the roofing side of the business. We're looking at some vertical markets where we can take our product and bend it into certain areas that make certain, strategic workflows for us. So what we're also doing here is looking at those opportunities. And we've got some good head start there because we have some guys that have been kind of our initial adopters that have worked with us to show us the best way to do this and the best way to do that. And so this is kind of one of the areas this next year you'll start seeing more information on that. We're also very committed to the Intact world, so and the Sage 100 world. So we're looking to get those integrations done. We're just we did so much growth last year that we're just having to get our resources in line. And but this is a product that we feel very excited about, and we think that over this next year we're going to be able to convince a lot of folks that are using Sage Inventory, PO, to look at our product and convert. And then of course, if you're looking for something web-based and mobilized, this is what you want to do. And because we're single tenant, we can do modification work and changes and make adjustments to the program.
So Steve, question
Yes,
for
sir.
you. So you just said something that makes me, so you don't have to have, or you're replacing POIV with this?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes, that's a good. Thanks for the question. You would not use POIV with this. You would actually replace it.
Awesome.
All right. If you want to do a little deeper dive into this, let us know and we'll be glad to set up an appointment. All right, guys. Well, y'all have a good day, and we look forward to hearing from you guys in the future.
Awesome, Steve. Thank you.
All right.